He only got 4 weeks left, and you'll get the whole thing.
Well, I just need to record that form so I can go home and figure it out.
I know, I did the same thing.
All right. A pastor in Kansas City, Kansas, was organizing opportunities for people in his church to do small acts of kindness as a demonstration of Christ's love in the community. He phoned several neighborhood grocery stores and laundromats for permission to do specific services. In one call, the employee who answered the phone hesitated and said, "I'll need to ask the manager first. Let me make sure I understand. You want to clean up a parking lot, retrieve shopping carts, hold umbrellas for customers, and you don't want anything in return." "That's right," said the pastor. After disappearing for a moment, the employee returned to the phone. "I'm sorry," he said. "We can't let you do that, because if we let you do it, we have to let everybody else do it too." And that's a bad thing. Why? See, the problem is we live in a world that is so self-absorbed within itself. Me and Sheree have been doing a Bible study together, and it's looking at the 7 deadly sins: pride, lust, gluttony, greed. And one of the things that it talks about is pride. And pride in itself is not a problem, because you do something good at work, or you, like we built and closed in that patio. I'm proud of the work because I've never done anything like that before. It's still standing a year later, so that's a plus. It took some work and conniving and everything else, but got the steel door to stay up and it's not falling over.
That's
And it walks.
Yes.
I'm proud of that. There's nothing wrong with that. But when we start thinking more highly of ourselves and so little of each other, that's one of the biggest problems that we have in our culture today, is that we're trying to cancel everything because we don't feel good about ourselves. We don't feel like we measure up. So this morning, I want us to look at finding a little heaven in our home, finding a little heaven here on earth, finding a little heaven in our relationships. And in order for us to do that, I'm so sorry to bust your bubble, but it's one of those nasty 4, 5-letter words. Having flashbacks from last week. One of those nasty, dirty, filthy 5-letter word called serve. If you want to taste heaven here on earth, if you want to be Christ-like, if you want to have freedom, Paul is going to tell us here in these 3 verses of Galatians chapter 5, verses 13 through 15, you must serve one another. But if I do that, what if everybody else did that too? Ooh, novel idea. What would that look like?
Better world.
Exactly, a much better world. So look with me, verse 13. We look at Galatians chapter 5, verse 13. For you were called to freedom, brothers. Only do not use your freedom as an opportunity for the flesh, but through love serve one another. See, we've been called to freedom. We've studied this all through here, and as we dive into chapter 5, he's been telling us, okay, we're moving away from what the law says. We're moving into this grace mode. We're moving into actually putting boots to action. You say you believe this. You say you want this. Let's see how true you really are to wanting it. How about you live it now? See, for too long, the church has been nothing more than lip service. I love you, God. I love you, God. I praise you, God. And we'll jump up and down. We'll clap our hands. We'll raise our hands to the songs. And we'll even amen the preacher to death. And, man, that sounds always good. To know that somebody's agreeing with you when you're preaching. But the problem is, we check all of that at the door when we walk out. I love God, I love God, I love... Okay, I'm done with this church stuff. He'll be there next Sunday. But that's not what God called us to do. Because He never called us to go to church. He called us to be the church. And in order for us to be the church, there's something we've got to do. Paul tells us, don't do things according to the flesh. But as we see, to unlock our freedom, we must not serve ourselves. Stop with the I-itis. Me. This isn't choir practice, and we're not warming our voices and doing the do-re-mis. We need to get past ourself. We don't need to indulge our sinful nature. We don't need to give demands. We need something different. We need something bolder. We need a new. Literally, what he's saying here is, do not let your freedom become a base camp, a base of operations for the flesh. In the early morning of June 6th, 1944, 5,300 ships carrying 153,000 Americans and Allied troops landed on the beaches of Normandy, France. It was D-Day. And this is where everything changed. The Allied forces knew that if they could establish a beachhead at Normandy, they would eventually win the war. And that's exactly what they did. They established a beachhead, a base camp, the center of operations, there on the beaches. But it cost a lot of lives. And we had it's weird to say privilege, of going to the Silent Wings Museum and seeing video. And you see these paratroopers, the only request that they had, please don't drop us behind enemy lines. And don't drop us in the water. They're being shot down. There was no other option. And they were just having to bail out of the planes. These 18, 19, 20-year-old guys jumping out of the airline. Perfectly good airplane. Jumping out into freezing cold water. Some of them falling helplessly, getting stuck in trees and just dangling there for the enemy. They did all of that, which makes no sense in the grand scheme of things. Why in the world would you want to do something like that? Why would you want to go into a battle like that? To free someone and to ensure that we keep our freedom. See, Jesus jumped out of the plane of heaven and was dangled on a tree so that we could have freedom restored. So that we could offer freedom to others. He was willing to sacrifice himself. And you know, we do. Mothers, y'all do the same thing for us all the time. Who is always the last one to eat? Even on Mother's Day. Who rarely ever gets a hot meal that wasn't reheated in the microwave. I was watching a video getting ready for the service to put the videos together, and it was a dad sitting there teaching his son how to ride a bike, how to play catch, how to hit, how to tackle, how to run. And then he watches them at his pee-wee football games. He's cheering them on, and he's excited. Watching them at his high school games, and he's there, and I mean, when he does good, I mean, that's my boy, that's my boy. And when he does bad, oh, come on. Did you see the call? Did you see how they blew it? It wasn't the son's fault. Come on, son, you can do this. I believe in you. Then him and his wife are watching the National College Championship game. And they win, and he scored the winning touchdown. And his dad's all excited, and they're interviewing him about how it feels. And he says, is there anything you would like to say to the people back home? And he said, yeah, there is something. I got to say something to my greatest hero, the one who I look up to. Dad's sitting there. Here it comes. Hi, Mom. And Mom's just sitting over there in the chair, tearing up and dying laughing. Dad's over there. Really? Not even a mention. And then he looks over at her and says, well, couldn't have done it without you. See, you mothers will sacrifice anything for your kids. That's how it's supposed to be. Jesus sacrificed everything so that we can have freedom. What is the one thing that we always tell our kids? We want you to have a better life than what we had. We want you to do better than what we did. We don't want you to make the same mistakes that we made. And we tell people, we tell our kids these things, but why are we not telling the world, hey, there's a better way than what you're doing? There's a better way than when you see a police officer start yelling and cussing him out and calling him a racist just because he wears a uniform and a badge. This is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Just because you live in a white house doesn't mean that you hate black houses. Just because you live in a brown house doesn't mean you hate white houses. The last two vehicles we've had are black. We're looking for another color because black attracts heat. It's really hot. That doesn't mean we don't like red cars, white cars. And if you think that's stupid that I'm saying that you hate another color of a car or a house just because yours is different, it's the same stupidity as hating somebody else just because they have more melanin than you do. That's stupid. Because I can guarantee you, if you pulled off the layer of skin with color, you couldn't tell the difference by looks. Of course, everybody's going to be freaked out with somebody walking down with just muscles and bones and seeing veins everywhere. It'd be worse than tuning into The Walking Dead. But there is nothing that is different about somebody of a different race, different economic status than there is of anybody else. And we can't see that if all we're trying to do is serve ourselves. In 2005, July of 2005, ESPN did an interview with the, at the time, youngest quarterback ever to win the Super Bowl, Ben Roethlisberger. And one of her questions concerned his decision to ride a motorcycle without a helmet. He said, "Oh, well, it's not the law in Pennsylvania. You don't have to wear it." So I don't. Now, if it was a law, by sure, all means I would wear a helmet, but it's not the law, so I don't. It's not really that big of a deal. Just under a year, June of 2006, he was involved in a serious accident. A 62-year-old woman failed to yield the right-of-way at an intersection, and Roethlisberger was thrown into the windshield of her Chrysler Town & Country car. His bike was totaled, and emergency surgeons spent 7 hours repairing a broken jaw, a fractured skull, a missing tooth, and several other facial injuries that he still has scars from. After recovering, he apologized to his fans, to his family, and he said, "I don't care if it's the law or not. I will never ride if I ever get to be back on a bike without a helmet." See, just because we have freedom to do something doesn't mean we should. As Americans, we have the freedom to say whatever we want to say. Doesn't mean we should. There's a lot of things that we shouldn't say that would be a whole lot better if we just kept our mouths shut. Go back to something that our moms taught us. You can't say nothing nice. Don't say nothing at all. And that brings us to the next point on unlocking our freedom. Not only do we stop serving ourselves, but we start serving one another in love. God set us free so that we could genuinely love one another. There's no way in our human strength that we would ever do what Christ did on the cross for someone else. I mean, we want to say that we would do that for our kids, for our spouse, for our parents. But let's be honest. They ain't live their own life. That's a lot of pain. That's a lot of humiliation. And in the grand scheme of things, of thinking about different ways that I would be okay with dying, sleep, heart attack, anything quick. Just get it over with. No long, painful suffering. Dying on a cross never even broke the top 1 billion ways to die. In my idea of, hey, this would be a cool way to go. But would we do that? Or even fathom giving everything we have and dying for even our enemy? Maybe die to get away from our enemy, but die for our enemy. Would we be willing to go that far? There's no way that we could love someone else. We couldn't love anyone else unless we knew what love was at first. Because We know what love is because God loved us first. Now that we know that we don't have to earn God's love, now that we know we don't have to prove ourselves, we are free to humble ourselves to love others, to show others. God set us free from the pressure to perform. He set us free from the law so that we could freely and without fear submit ourselves to one another. There's a story about Florence Nightingale, who was born in Florence, Italy in 1820. I love this story. She was born to an English family of ample means. She traveled and attended parties with the chosen of society on the family estate. When she was 16, she received a divine call. On February 7th, 1837, she wrote, God spoke to me and called me into his service. At first, she didn't know what that meant or what she would do, but she began what she called cottage visiting. Over family objections, she began taking food and medicine to poor farmers who lived on the family's islands. Then she began to think about nursing. Her family was scandalized because in the early 1800s, nurses were considered unskilled laborers and had a reputation of drunkenness and promiscuity. Uh-oh, you in trouble. Nurses, the ones that take care of us. Who was the first nurse we ever met that we remember meeting? Because unless you're one of them weird little people that can remember coming out and being born and being in the delivery room, the first nurse that we know is the one who always fixes our boobies. Our boo-boos. To fix our boo-boos, our problems, our scraped knees, is our mothers. And who fixes our mistakes when we slip up. Our moms are there. And would you ever think of your mom as being promiscuous? As being drunkards? Yeah. See, proper ladies at that time in France kept a fine house, gave parties, and made brilliant conversation. In 1844, American philanthropist Samuel and Julia Ward Howe, who was the one who wrote the great hymn, Battle Hymn of the Republic, visited the Nightingale home. Florence asked him, do you think it would be unsuitable and unbecoming for a young English woman to devote herself to works of charity in hospitals? Dr. Howe replied, it would be unusual, and in England, whatever is unusual is unbecoming and unsuitable. But I say to you, go forward. After that conversation, regardless of what anyone said, Florence Nightingale pursued God's word. She said there was never any vagueness in my plans or ideas as to what God's work for me was. That work did not begin for another 9 years. Again, family obligations she had to overcome, objections she had to overcome. Finally, after studying nursing, first in books and then by visiting European hospitals, and finally by training at hospitals in Germany, England, and France, she began to serve as director of a home for invalid gentlewomen when the Crimean War broke out. When she heard about the deplorable conditions on the front, Nightingale took 38 nurses to see what they could do and found things worse than what they had heard. They witnessed filth, infection, disorganization, and an overwhelming caseload. Shiploads of desperately needed medical supplies sat in the harbor while men died because some official had not filled out the proper forms. Leave it to a mom to organize. That's why you can always find stuff. Or after she goes in and cleans your room, you can't find anything because she got it cleaned and organized. In that environment, 42% of the wounded never recovered. Nightingale ended up organizing the barracks hospital, including a kitchen, laundry, and clean latrines. She opened windows to let in fresh air and provided supplies by cutting administrative red tape or buying them herself. She provided reading and recreation rooms for the patients, rode home to their loved ones, and provided a safe way to mail their pay home. The soldiers adored her and christened her the Lady of the Lamp, after the Turkish lantern she carried on her midnight rounds. Her efforts brought remarkable results. The death rate dropped from 42% to less than 3%. Florence Nightingale was free to serve because God had set her free from the need to impress her family and friends. See, when we get over ourselves, like moms have to do, because everybody tells you when you're pregnant, oh, you're just so beautiful, you just have that glow, and everybody's so enamored with you until you have a baby. They might ask how you are. Oh, how's the baby? We come to see the baby. We come to see the baby. The baby gets gifts. It's all about the baby. It's all about your children. It's all about them. And you fall into the background. But see, as believers, that's how it's supposed to be with us. Nobody cares about us. And we need to be okay with that. Because been listening to a sermon series, and after each one of Jesus' miracles that he performed, when everybody's trying to see the miracle and then they turn to look for Jesus, he's not there. Because he backs into the crowd and disappears in the people. One passage even says that they were getting ready to stone him and he walked through the crowd. See, we need to be willing to get over ourselves to better somebody else, to help someone else in their need. We must be willing to love one another. We need to have that love of God in Christ. Through love, we must serve one another. And then this last point, to unlock our freedom. And I know this sounds completely backwards from what we did last week. We need to satisfy the law. But hold on. You told us last week that you need to forget the law, get away from the law, and now you're telling us to satisfy the law? I didn't think we could satisfy it. I thought we were incapable of doing that. That's why Christ came. You're right. We can't. Notice what verse 14 tells us. Chapter 5, verse 14. For the whole law is fulfilled in one word. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. See, when we get over ourselves and we're loving one another in love, we satisfy the law. Because we're doing what the law says. When the rich young ruler came to Jesus and said, what must I do to be saved? What's the greatest commandment? Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, with all your strength. This is the greatest commandment. The next is just like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. On these two, all the law and the prophets rest. You had the rich ruler that came to him. And he said, what must I do to inherit eternal life? Keep the commandments. Don't kill. Don't commit adultery. Don't covet. Well, I've done that. I've kept them since I was a baby. Okay. Then you lack one thing. Go home. Sell all of your possessions. Give it to the poor and then come follow me. Crickets. And he went home, Scripture says, sorrowful. And Jesus uttered these words. It is harder for a rich man. Someone with tons of possession that has that itis to enter into the kingdom of heaven. Remember, he who has the most stuff still dies. And a lot of poor, broke, scum of the earth, as what society would say, people live a much more happier life. And when we get to heaven, just based upon what we read in Scripture, I have a feeling there's going to be more of them there than the rich. Because rich don't see their need. But there's a need. If we concentrate on loving others as we love ourselves, then we find ourselves doing all that God has commanded us to do. Yes, we are free from the law. But no, we're not free to do whatever we want to. Grace is never a license to live how you want to. Come on church on Sunday and ask God to forgive you, and everything's hunky-dory, and you go back out and do the same thing all over again. That's not being sorry for your sins. That's sorry you got caught. Or we're just doing a ritual that we've talked about, that we're just doing the same thing over and over again just because that's what we're supposed to. Why are you here on a Sunday morning? Because that's what you're supposed to do. It's Sunday. It's church day. I'd rather you stay home if that's the only reason why you're here. I'm glad you're here because you're going to hear the truth. But if you're not coming because you want to, but when we were kids, who made sure we were there whether we wanted to or not? I'm just tired. Okay, you can be tired of church too. Dad was the worst on that. My bedroom was here, there was a bathroom here, and then the living room. His rule was, I wasn't too sick to stay home if I could make it to the living room without having to stop at the bathroom twice. You can lay down on the back pew with a trash can, but you won't be at church. One time, nearly had a heart attack. I got to go to a dance on a Saturday night. The rule was I could go, but I will be at church and I will not go to sleep. I got bored there and was like, yeah, this is nothing I want to be a part of. This is junior high dance. Yeah, no, let me go. And so I called, dance started at 7, I called at 8. It's like, can I come home? The rules still apply. I was tired. You want to stay awake? You went last night. See, our parents drill into us. You have to do something. Guess what happens when we follow what rules Mom set for us? It's amazing. This little belt stayed where it needs to be. Not on us. Those switches stayed on the tree. Not on us. We didn't get near as much trouble when we did what we were told to do. When we were told to do it. See, we did those things. We may have thought just not get out of trouble, but we were actually doing them because we love our mom. We may have had fear of her, but we did it because we love her. So, here's my question. Who do we love more? Our mom or God? Because if we'll do what our mom says, shouldn't we do what God says to do? Shouldn't we do it out of love? I mean, what's the worst our mom could do to us? Wear us out? Send us to bed without TV or phone? Of course, we didn't have that problem. Without food? That's the worst. Maybe go sit outside and think about what you've done. What's the worst that God could do if we don't follow that way? See, that's what we should do. We should be ready to go. Because love propels us to do things. Alida Hussein, 78 years old, of Rotterdam, Netherlands, had been smoking for 50 years. For 50 years she tried to give it up and never could. Nothing she tried was ever successful. That is until Leo Jansen, 79, came into her life. It was a wild love affair. They were madly in love. The day finally came when Leo, ready to pop the question, he said, "Will you marry me?" Of course. She's reaching for the ring, and he said, "There's a catch. I won't marry you until you quit smoking." That day, after 50 years of trying, she was finally able to give up her cigarettes, her cigars, and her pipes. Do you know why? She had a reason to do something. What is our reason to love others, to love God? See, when we think about love, it's fickle. We talk about it all the time. Well, I'm in love. Well, I fell out of love. It's not a hole that you can fall out of. You either love someone or you don't. And it's a different type of love. It's not the same love. I love pizza. I love lasagna. I love blue. I love the warmth. And see, there should be different levels of the true love. I love my wife, but I don't love my son the same way I love my wife. And you mothers can say the same thing. And whether you want to admit it or not, you do have favorites. We all know. And if you're the middle child, I'm just sorry. You're the middle child. But there's a reason that we can know what real love is. That we can know love and how to love. Because what we read in 1 John chapter 4, verse 19, we love because He first loved us. Romans 5, tells us that while we were still enemies, while we were still at war with God, He loved us and died for us. I mean, come on. He loved us so much that He gave His only Son for us. And we're to follow Him and do what He says. See, we must know that God loves us unconditionally. We must understand that God accepts us and affirms us right now just as we are. No matter what you've done. No matter how far you fall. No matter how disgusting. No matter how dirty. Jesus is holding a water hose, a washcloth. Just come here. Let me scrub behind your ears. You know how you mamas are. You see that thumb coming after she licked it, you're backing away. No, 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 Mom, we're in public. Or the, here, let me get your hair just right. You know how you moms are. See, we have to believe that just like our moms love us unconditionally, you know, you sometimes wonder if they do. Then you look back at what they've done for you. Everything they've sacrificed. Like the one kid said, you know, my mom was stupid. She was pretty smart when I was little. Then I got 12. Man, she was just dumb. She was dumber than dirt. The older I got, the worse it was. I was so glad to get away from that when I turned 18. It's amazing how much you learn from 18 to 21. And then the older you get, it was like, wow, how stupid was I? She was so smart. You know those things that I'm never going to say those things that my mom ever said to me. And then all of a sudden, you stop yourself. Whoa, I just heard my mom. You know, moms are pretty right a lot of the time. And when she tells you, I love you, you're mine. You can believe it just like you can believe what God says. I love you. You are mine. No matter. Because He sets us free to live for one another. And then our final thing, to unlock our freedom, we've got to stop fighting each other. You can't fight with someone that you love other than family. We do that all the time. But we need to end the conflict. We need to discontinue the critical remarks, which only destroy relationships. Look at verse 15. Verse 15 tells us, but if you bite and devour one another, watch out that you are not consumed by one another. You're not consumed. You're not destroyed. You don't eat each other. How in the world can we destroy one another and say that we love one another? It goes back to what James says. Out of one side of the mouth comes blessings, and out of the very next side comes curses. We don't need to be like the Tasmanian devils. In January 2006, Australian scientists discovered the cause of a mysterious disease that had killed thousands of Tasmanian devils on the island state of Tasmania. The scientists initially believed the deaths were caused by a virus, but their research ultimately uncovered a rare, fatal cancer. They named it devil facial tumor disease, or DFTD. What is strange, according to one scientist, is that the abnormalities in the chromosomes of the cancer cells were the exact same cells in every tumor. That means the disease began in the mouth of one single sick devil. As they fight for food, as they fight for territory, the Tasmanian devils would bite and claw at each other. And where they normally bit was on the side of the mouth. And part of that tumor would chip off and go into the wound and infect the other devil. Who fought with another devil, it flake off and go into that devil. Until they were wiping themselves off from the face of the earth. Consequently, DFTD spread at an alarming rate until ultimately wiping out over 40% of the Tasmanian devils on that one island. They were killing themselves. And look at our world today. We're killing ourselves. We have a horrible case of DFTD. We are stuck with this devil facial tumor disease because all we see is me. And I've got to have me. I've got to have this. I've got to have this. And you're going to give it to me because you owe it to me. What if we changed our mindset? What if we started loving one another? What if we started doing like that one pastor wanted to do with his church? To reach out to others. Just hold an umbrella when it's raining or it's real sunny for the elderly to go in. We're carrying their groceries out. We're helping return all the baskets. You know how it is when you go to Walmart, there ain't a single basket anywhere to be found. Because they're way out somewhere in the parking lot. And they couldn't do that because if we let you, then we'd have to let everybody. Okay, let everybody. I told you before the story of my sophomore English class, where we did a week-long study on hate. And we put pictures and newspaper clippings all up in the room on the bulletin boards. And that filled it up about on Tuesday. Wednesday we started doing the ceiling. It's amazing how as thin as newspaper is, when it goes over fluorescent lights, it really dims that round. We finished the walls. We started going all down the hallway. Both sides of the hallway filled with hate. The room filled with hate. We came in Friday. You hated walking into that room. I mean, this is newspaper. It's small print up on the ceiling or up on the wall. You can't really just walk in and read everything there. You could read some headlines, but not a whole lot. You just walked in and you just felt bad. Because you were surrounded by nothing but hate. And that Fridays are a great day. Because you're at the end of the week, you're relaxing, or Our teacher was laid back anyway, but he came in and everything he said was mean and rude. Why are you saying hi to me? There's no reason for you to say hi to me. Just sit down and shut up. And you're like, I want to leave. Because we were the last class of the day, we had the fun of tearing all that hate down right at the end. We were blinded because the light was the last thing that we got to clear off. You started feeling better ripping that down. We had to leave it in the hall. But in the classroom, we were ripping it down. Then we got to tear off the lights. When we did the lights, we're all squinting because we could see clear. The next week was love. Same assignment. On Friday, we finally finished the inside and outside of the door. Nothing in the halls. Part of that is because media doesn't generate a whole lot of attention with feel-good love stories. But what if we were the ones who changed that? What if you and I said there's enough hate? We don't need that anymore. What if, let me find a way I can love you? Because God has shown me love. So let me love you. And not only just love you, but let me serve you. Moms don't just serve their children. Because there's a lot of moms out there that don't. What they do though, is when they love you, they'll do anything for you. If we truly love one another, why don't we do that for others? So that way, we can do what this song from Bill Gaither that he wrote in 1978 says. I am loved. I am loved. I can risk loving you. For the one who knows me best loves me most. I am loved. You are loved. Won't you please take my hand? We are free to love one another. We are loved. Imagine the difference in this world when we show a little bit of love and kindness instead of hate and blindness. We want to say that Black Lives Matter or all lives matter or blue lives matter. No life will matter until we get over ourselves and being willing to serve one another regardless of what we look like, regardless of what we smell like, regardless of how much money we have. Until we serve one another in love, we will never truly love one another. We're free. So let's live in that freedom this week. God, we thank you that you love us. May we love you. Give us the spirit. Give us the mindset. Give us the brokenness and the heart to love one another. In spite of differences, in spite of race, in spite of economic status. And if If they're a human, we love them. Because you loved us in spite of us. May we be willing to serve one another. You were willing to wash our feet, the lowest and humblest job of any slave. May we be willing to do something for our neighbor. Thank you for your word today. That without love and service, we're just going for lip service and through the motions. May we truly be called